A note on Full Metal Jacket. A very important, excellent film on war, training camps, violence. Stanley Kubrick, one of the best movie makers ever, a director in the top five, I'd say. He's the man who gave us, the audiences, the public, Paths of Glory. I've noted on about a month ago. Kirk Douglas, the wonder film again about war, a meditation on duty, on the stupidity of the superiors. In fact, there will be similarities between Paths of Glory and this war. That was World War One, atrocities and the silliness of ordering soldiers to advance when they couldn't. I mean, the artillery fire meant that they would just step outside the trench and they would be killed. And if not, those who didn't, because they couldn't advance, faced court martial and they were killed by their own outrageous superiors, generals, and commanders. Spartacus, Doctor Strangelove, and How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, one of the best five comedies ever. 2001, one of the best 5, 10 science fiction movies ever. So we're talking here a genius. Lolita, one of the best films ever. Again, I'm thinking most of the Stanley Kubrick films are there on the New York Times list, the best 1000 movies, and on AFI and other movies, movie lists in the world, prestigious ones. I forgot Clockwork to mention Clockwork Orange, another masterpiece, chef d'oeuvre, fabulous. This one, as I mentioned, has aspects in common with Paths of Glory because we're talking again absurd situations in the army, in training for the Vietnam War, and what happens during that fighting. And this, it probably joins a line of great movies about that event, about that conflict, and in general, because they're not just good war movies, they're good motion pictures, period. Platoon, Apocalypse Now, to mention just two. Matthew Modine is Private Joker, he's called Davis. Vincent D'Onofrio is Private Leonard Gomer Pyle. And we also have Sergeant Hartman. I will just limit myself to these three major players, so to say, characters. And I have in mind a few scenes. The beating of Pyle by his comrades. Pyle is dragging them down, and we have that situation which is used in army. Mata pe viață. I had a cousin, I still have him, but he's in Argentina now, and former best friend who trained to be a captain of a ship, but in those days, in the communist regime, even if it didn't have to do with military, this thing, he was opting for civilian life, civilian navy. Still, it was considered that they have to go through army training, military drill. And he kept saying to me, and when I see these films, I remember, and I see how right he was, that to be in the army is to be stupid, because indeed it's not being creative, it's not using intelligence, not using emotional intelligence, except perhaps sometimes anticipating, just obeying, waiting to see what the superior, like a dog, what the superior has to say, and following blindly. I mean, it's bad and sad. So they beat him because they would suffer on account of bile, so they beat him in this night with having the socks some weights of some kind, and they just keep hitting him. Another moment is when the sergeant in command over this group of trainees, hard, obsessed man, typical of the army, talks about the killers, Oswald, who killed President Kennedy, and the man who was responsible for massacre in Texas. They both had been in training with the Marines. So the point was, look how well they shoot. I mean, they shot from far ahead, and the emphasis is on how well they could handle the gun, and not the killings, the tragedies they caused. And then again, he says something like, God has your soul, but the army has your body. Finally, a scene which is haunting. Vincent D'Onofrio plays very well the man who reached his limit, being beaten and persecuted. He gets off the rails, and he gets mad, literally, starts talking with his gun, and eventually turns that gun on his sergeant and then on himself. That's, I can say that because it's not a spoiler alert. We're not really into the middle of the film yet.